I refused to fund my brother's extravagant wedding, and our mother cut all ties with me, calling me selfish and ungrateful. So, I decided to be selfish by taking back the house I was letting her live in. Now she's homeless and wants my help. I guess I should start by introducing myself. I'm Lauren, and at 29, I've already endured enough family drama to last a lifetime. My early childhood memories are blurry, but I remember flashes of when my dad was still around. I was only 5 when he passed away, and his face in my mind gets hazier every year. Mom didn't waste time moving on. Within a year, she remarried, and a year later, my half-brother Ethan was born. To be fair, my stepfather wasn't a bad guy. He treated me decently enough during the 10 years he was around. But when I was 15, he and Mom divorced. That's when everything changed. Mom didn't need to work because she was getting a good amount of alimony, but she developed a nasty habit of reminding me that my own father had left us with nothing, while my stepfather's money had kept me clothed and fed. What Mom didn't realize was that I knew the truth about our house. It originally belonged to my dad's parents, and when I turned 18, my grandfather, rest his soul, transferred the deed to my name. I'll never forget the evening Mom confronted me about it. "Lauren, what do you plan to do with the house?" she asked, eyes locked on me like a hawk. I remember feeling confused. "Nothing. You and Ethan can stay here, like always." The way her face softened and how quickly she hugged me, I should have recognized it as manipulation. But I was young and still desperate for her approval. I worked my ass off in school, earned a full scholarship to college and secured an internship through sheer determination, unlike Ethan, who is now 22 and treats school as an afterthought. I understood the value of hard work. Maybe that's because I had to earn everything myself, while I ended up paying for his college when he turned 18. Yeah, you read that right. I was funding my brother's education. Somehow, Mom convinced me that it was my responsibility when Ethan graduated high school. "You can afford it now," she said, as if I owed it to them. I agreed to cover a public university, even though Ethan had his sights set on an expensive private school. Looking back, that was the first of many red flags I ignored. It was just another Tuesday when everything started to unravel. I had gone to Mom's house, technically my house, but I never brought that up, for our usual family dinner. I had barely stepped inside when Ethan burst in behind me, practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." He was grinning like he had just won the lottery. "Ethan, what's going on?" I asked, trying to calm him down. He beamed at me. "Mia said yes. I'm getting married." Mia was his longtime girlfriend, and a nice enough person. My heart did this weird little twist. I had recently broken up with my boyfriend after catching him cheating, so wedding news wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear. Still, I forced a big sister smile. "Wow, Ethan. Congratulations. But, aren't you still in college?" He waved a hand dismissively. "College doesn't matter. This is way more important." "Ethan, education is," I started, but Mom cut me off. "Oh, honey, this is wonderful news," she gushed, completely ignoring my concerns. "We need to start planning immediately. Should we book that estate venue, or maybe the new banquet hall downtown?" I sat there, listening to them brainstorm, their ideas growing more expensive by the second. That old, familiar feeling crept in, the one where I was the only adult in the room. "We need at least 250 guests," Ethan was saying. "And fireworks. Big ones. Don't forget the ice sculpture," Mom chimed in, like it was as essential as a wedding dress. I couldn't take it anymore. "I should head home," I said, standing up. "I've got work tomorrow." Neither of them really noticed me leaving, they were too caught up in planning what was already shaping up to be the wedding of the year. As I drove back to my apartment, I had a sinking feeling in my gut. Something told me this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. A week passed after Ethan's big announcement, and I was beginning to think I had overreacted. Then my phone rang. It was Mom, and her voice had that tone, the one she used whenever she was about to ask for something. "Lauren, sweetheart, can you come over? We need to have a serious talk." When I arrived, Ethan was already there, practically vibrating with excitement. He had a giant binder filled with magazine cutouts and scribbled notes. Before I could even sit down, he launched into his vision. "I've planned everything perfectly," he declared, flipping through the pages. "The venue has a stunning ballroom, and they do this thing where doves fly out as the bride and groom say their vows. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but I could already tell where this was going. That sounds expensive. Oh, well, about that. Ethan pulled out a sheet of paper covered in numbers. I crunched all the costs. When he handed me the budget, my stomach dropped. The numbers weren't just high, they were outrageous. The venue alone cost more than a year's rent for me. Then there were the fireworks, a live celebrity band, custom floral arrangements, gourmet catering. You can't be serious, I blurted, my voice a little higher than normal. Ethan frowned, scanning the paper. What? It's totally reasonable. Reasonable? I choked out. Ethan, this is more than a house down payment. That's when the waterworks started. Ethan's face crumpled, and he buried his head in his hands. You're just bitter because you don't have a fiancé. Lauren. Mom snapped, but not at him, at me. How dare you be so cruel to your brother? I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. Look, I've been helping a lot already. I'm paying for his college, his rent, his... Oh, here we go, Mom interrupted, rolling her eyes. Now you're going to throw that in his face? That's what family does, Lauren. We take care of each other. You're just doing your duty as an older sister. I stood up, my hands shaking. I'm leaving. This is ridiculous. Fine. Ethan shouted after me. Don't expect an invitation to the wedding. You're selfish and jealous. I slammed the door behind me, but not before hearing Mom console him. Don't worry, sweetie. Your sister has always been difficult. We'll figure something out. And that was the moment I knew, this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about my entire life. And I was done being used. The next 2 weeks were blissfully quiet. No calls from Mom. No texts from Ethan. No guilt trips or manipulation attempts. For the first time in years, I actually got to focus on work and enjoy some peace. But, of course, it didn't last. One afternoon, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and was surprised to see my stepfather's name. We hadn't spoken in a while, though we had always maintained a decent relationship after his divorce from Mom. Lauren, got a minute? He sounded exhausted. Sure, what's up? Your mother and Ethan came to see me, he said, followed by a long sigh. They showed me this wedding budget. I couldn't help but chuckle. Let me guess, they asked you to pay for it? They did, until I saw the numbers. Lauren, what the hell are they thinking? Ethan has never worked a day in his life, he's still in college, which you're paying for, by the way, and he wants a wedding that costs more than my first house? They tried to get me to pay for it first, I explained. When I refused, Ethan threw a tantrum and said he'd ask you instead. He let out a dry laugh. Well, I told them absolutely not. Ethan may be my son, but I'm not going to encourage this entitled behavior. He needs to grow up. We talked for a while, venting about the situation. It felt good to know I wasn't alone in thinking this was completely insane. But my brief moment of validation didn't last. A week later, Mom and Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced. They didn't mention their failed attempt at getting money from my stepfather. Instead, they came armed with a new budget, still ridiculous, but slightly less astronomical. See? Ethan said, shoving the paper at me. We cut things down. Now you can help. I skimmed the numbers. They had removed the doves and the celebrity band, but the total cost was still outrageous. Ethan, I still can't pay for this. You could take out a loan, he said, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh and say he was joking. He wasn't. You know, Mom chimed in, smiling like Ethan had just said something profound, that's actually a great idea. The payments wouldn't be too bad if you spread them out over a few years. That was it. I stood up, walked to the front door, and held it open. Get out. Both of you. I'm not taking out a loan for this wedding. I'm not paying for any of it. End of discussion. You selfish. Ethan spat, grabbing his coat. Mom just gave me one of her classic disappointed mother looks. I really thought I raised you better than this, Lauren. I shut the door behind them. Then, I slid down to the floor and put my head in my hands. Somehow, I knew this wasn't over. With my family, it never is. A month passed, and life went on. Then came my Aunt Julia's birthday, my dad's sister and one of the few relatives I still had a good relationship with. I couldn't not go, even though I knew Mom and Ethan would be there. The party was at Aunt Julia's house, a cozy home filled with family photos, including several of my dad. I loved looking at them, trying to hold on to what few memories I had of him. When I walked in, the tension was immediate. Mom and Ethan were already there, whispering in the corner, sending me death glares. I ignored them and went straight to Aunt Julia. Happy birthday. I hugged her, grateful for at least one normal family connection. Lauren, sweetheart, she whispered as she hugged me. I heard about everything. Are you okay? I just nodded and handed her my gift. The next hour was manageable. I caught up with my cousins, carefully navigating the party to avoid Mom and Ethan. Everyone seemed to be aware of the tension but was too polite to say anything. Then came time for the toasts. My stomach dropped when Mom stood up, wine glass in hand. She had that look, the one that meant she was about to start drama. I'd like to say something, she began, her voice sweet in that fake, insidious way. Julia, you've always been such a wonderful sister-in-law. You understand the importance of family, unlike some people in this room. The atmosphere shifted. People glanced around awkwardly. You know, Mom continued, eyes locked directly on me, it breaks my heart when children grow up ungrateful, selfish, and completely dismissive of the sacrifices their parents have made for them. That was it. I had had enough. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Stop right there, I said, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. You want to talk about ungrateful? Let's talk about how you have been living in my house, yes, everyone, my house, the one my grandfather left to me, not to you. Let's talk about how I've been paying for Ethan's college, his rent, his entire lifestyle, while you two guilt-trip me for not taking out a loan for his ridiculous wedding. The room fell into stunned silence. Ethan, ever the performer, burst into tears. How dare you? Mom shrieked, her face flushed with rage. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay me? You are a worthless, greedy. Enough, I cut her off. You want greedy? Fine. I'll show you greedy. Get out of my house. Mom turned pale. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. You have 2 weeks to move out. After that, I'm getting lawyers involved. The entire room was silent. Ethan was still crying, but for once, I didn't care. I turned to Aunt Julia, who looked both shocked and proud. I'm sorry for ruining your birthday, I said softly, giving her a quick hug. I'll call you later. As I walked out, I could hear Mom screaming behind me, but I didn't turn back. My hands shook as I drove home, but deep down, something felt different. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what they would do next. I was done. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages and missed calls from Mom. I glanced at a few of them. Lauren, please. You can't do this to us. I didn't mean what I said. Where are we supposed to go? You're being ridiculous. I blocked her number. But, of course, that wasn't the end of it. Over the next few days, every relative I had started calling me. Some were gentle, trying to reason with me. Others were downright hostile. My cousin Brian took the diplomatic approach. Look, Lauren, I get that you're upset, but you can't throw your own mother out onto the street. Watch me, I replied, then hung up. Aunt Lisa tried guilt. Sweetheart, your mother's not perfect, but she's still your mother. Think about what your father would want. That one stung. But I stood firm. Dad would want his daughter to stop being manipulated and used. Don't bring him into this. And don't pretend none of you knew the truth about the house all these years. After days of harassment, I finally decided to get professional help. The lawyer I hired, Mr. Reynolds, was refreshingly straightforward. Here's the situation, he said, spreading out documents on his desk. You're the legal owner of the house. You've been paying all taxes and bills. Your mother could try to claim tenant rights due to long-term residency, but since you've been maintaining the property and she's lived there rent-free, any judge would likely side with you. What's my next step? I asked. We'll serve her with a formal eviction notice. 2 weeks is actually generous, you're well within your rights to demand she leave immediately. I had him draw up all the paperwork. When the 2 weeks were nearly up, I went to the house with him. I didn't want to face Mom alone. What we found was exactly what I expected. Mom was crying. Ethan was yelling. Boxes were scattered everywhere. This is illegal. Mom screamed when she saw my lawyer. I'll sue you, Lauren. I'll take everything you have. Mr. Reynolds remained perfectly calm. Mrs. Carter, you're welcome to pursue legal action, he said smoothly, but I should warn you, you'd likely lose. And the court costs would be substantial. How can you do this to your own family? Ethan demanded, getting in my face. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, I said, surprised at how little I felt. You have until tomorrow evening. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property. Mom tried a different approach. Her voice softened, turning desperate. Lauren, honey, please, she pleaded. I was upset when I said those things. You know I didn't mean it. But I'd heard it all before. The guilt trips. The manipulation. The fake apologies. I was done with all of it. Mr. Reynolds will oversee the final move out tomorrow, I said, turning to leave. I don't want to see either of you again. Later, I heard through Aunt Julia that Mom and Ethan had moved in with Ethan's fiancée, Mia. Apparently, the grand wedding plans were officially on hold due to lack of funds. Mom had been telling anyone who would listen about how her cruel, heartless daughter had thrown her out on the street. But here's the thing, for the first time in my life, I didn't care. Update 1. 3 months passed. The house sat empty. I couldn't bring myself to sell it or rent it out just yet. Sometimes, I drove by, remembering the good times before everything fell apart. Before Mom's manipulation became clear. Before Ethan turned into an entitled prince. Before I realized I had spent my entire life trying to please people who only saw me as a walking ATM. Then one day, Aunt Julia invited me over for coffee. She had been my rock through all of this, the only one in the family who never pressured me to change my mind. How are you really doing? She asked as she placed a plate of chocolate chip cookies in front of me, the ones she knew I loved. Honestly? Better than I expected, I admitted, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug. But there's something I haven't told anyone yet. She waited patiently as I gathered my thoughts. I've been seeing a therapist, I admitted. Dr. Collins. She's been helping me process my relationship with Mom and Ethan. How Mom's been manipulating me since Dad died. Using grief and guilt to control me. Aunt Julia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your father would be so proud of you, Lauren, she said. He was the most honest, straightforward person I knew. He wouldn't have wanted you to be used, even by family. She stood up and walked over to her bookshelf, pulling out an old photo album. I've been meaning to give you this. These are pictures of your dad, from before you were born, through your early years. We spent the next hour flipping through photos. There were pictures I had never seen before. Dad in college. Dad at his first job. Dad holding me as a baby. And in every single one, he had the same kind, genuine smile. Your mother. Aunt Julia hesitated. She changed after he died. I tried to stay close, to be there for you, but she pushed me away. When she remarried so quickly, we were all worried. But she wouldn't listen to anyone. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Rachel. For your information, Ethan's wedding is officially cancelled. Mia called it off. Aunt Julia saw my expression change. What is it? I showed her the text. I should feel bad, right? I said slowly. But honestly? I'm relieved. Mia's a good person. She deserves better than getting dragged into that mess. Have you heard anything else about them? I shook my head. Just what people tell me. They were still living with Mia, or were, I guess. Mom got a full-time job, for the first time in 20 years. Ethan dropped out of college. Are you going to stop paying his tuition? Already did, I said. Sent an official notice through my lawyer. Got a hysterical voicemail from Mom about how I was ruining Ethan's future. Blocked that number, too. Aunt Julia smiled as she poured more coffee. You know they're telling everyone that you're the villain in this story, right? I actually laughed. Let them. I'm done caring what they think. Done feeling guilty for having boundaries. Done being the family ATM. A week after my visit with Aunt Julia, I was working late at the office when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I debated ignoring it but answered anyway. It was Mia's ex-fiancé, Jake. "Lauren, please don't hang up," he sounded exhausted. "I need to talk to you. If this is about the wedding." "It's not." "Well, not directly." I called off the engagement. I leaned back in my chair. I heard. "I'm sorry, Jake." He gave a hollow laugh. "Don't be. Honestly? I should thank you. Watching how Ethan and your mom treated you, how they acted about the wedding, it opened my eyes. Ethan isn't the person I thought he was. What happened after I evicted them? They moved in with me," he admitted. "At first, I felt bad for them, but then I started noticing things. They never offered to contribute to bills. Ethan refused to look for work, said he was too stressed about the wedding. And your mom? She kept saying you'd come around eventually. That you'd feel guilty and start paying for everything again." I closed my eyes, feeling a migraine coming on. Of course she did. The final straw was when I caught them going through my personal documents. They were looking for my savings information. My investments. My financial records. Trying to figure out how much money I had. His voice hardened. I confronted Ethan about it. Want to guess what he said? I can already imagine. He said I was being selfish. Just like you. That if I really loved Mia, I'd want to give her the wedding of her dreams. Jake sighed. That's when I knew I had to end it. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, just thinking. Then, another text came in, from Rachel. Mom and Ethan got kicked out of Jake's place. They're staying with Grandma now. Ethan's telling everyone Jake cheated on him. Mom saying you turned him against her. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started browsing real estate listings. Maybe it was finally time to sell the house. To buy something new. Something that belonged only to me. The next day, I met with my therapist, Dr. Collins. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked. "You know what's weird?" I said, frowning slightly. "I feel guilty about not feeling guilty. Does that make sense?" She smiled. "It makes perfect sense. You've spent your whole life being conditioned to feel responsible for your mother and brother's happiness. It's natural to feel strange when you finally break free of that pattern. I keep waiting for the regret to hit. For that little voice in my head to tell me I'm a terrible daughter, a horrible sister. But I hesitated. It's not coming. All I feel is relief. Peace. Like I can finally breathe." Dr. Collins nodded. "That's because you've done nothing wrong. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Refusing to be manipulated isn't selfish. You are not responsible for the consequences of their actions." As I left her office, my phone rang again. Another unknown number. I debated answering it. But against my better judgment, I picked up. It was Ethan. "Lauren," his voice was shaking. "Please. I messed up. Jake kicked me out. I have nowhere to go." I stood there on the sidewalk, listening to him sob. 6 months ago, I would have caved. I would have offered him money, a place to stay. I would have let myself be guilt into carrying his burdens. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry you're having a hard time, Ethan. I hope you figure things out. Goodbye." Then, I hung up. Blocked his number. And walked to my car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in warm hues of orange and pink. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. They say blood is thicker than water. But I've learned that's not always a good thing. Sometimes, blood ties can drown you, if you let them. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to let go. I started my car and headed home. Not to the house where I grew up. Not to the past. But to my apartment. To my future. To a life where I finally put myself first. Thank you for watching the video. like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.